This is Tim Haggerty with the VTC C++ Fundamentals video training course, and now we're talking about namespaces. Namespaces are used to kind of subdivide the world. They allow us to subdivide the global scope into subscopes. You can kind of think of it as having a 1, 2, 3 Main Street. That's all well and good, but if you don't know what city and state you're in with a subdivision of your global scope, then you don't know what you're referring to with 1, 2, 3 Main Street. Well, that could be the same thing with X and Y and some kind of character and whatever other kind of variables we might have out there. So C++, this is a brand new thing for C++. C did not have this. C++ adds this concept of namespaces, and you use the word namespace and you give it a name, and then your definition of all of your code and classes and all kinds of functions and things that make up the namespace will be inside the braces in the definition part after the name. You then use the word using to select the namespace or multiple namespaces that you want to use in the particular part of code that you happen to be in at the time. And we'll take a look at an example here in just a minute. You can also make a new name for an old namespace. The old namespace might be really long and drawn out, so you can give it a shorter name, make it a little easier to write your code then later on. Let's take a look here quickly at an example. Here we're using a namespace called system, and you can see that our compiler here, our Visual C++, gives us some information about what the system namespace has in it, beyond anything we're going to talk about here, but it's there for your information. Now here we've created a namespace and called it first, all right, because it's the first one. And again, the compiler's helping us out there by showing us the name. And we have an integer x and y, and they're equal to 100 and 101. And then we have a new namespace called second. Pretty original. And that has an integer x of 200 and a y of 201. Now down here in our program, we can say that we want to use namespace first. And if we do that, when we say that, now when we do a write line of x or y, notice the compiler understands that it wants integer first, x, because we said to use this namespace first. Notice that our scope changed up here to global scope when we click down inside main. If you click on second here, our scope changes to second, because this is a list of all the different subscopes that we have. We have global and first and second, so we have created different scopes. So here I've given you a little comment that this is the first scope. This one will also be first scope, but now we can still get to the second scope and the things that are in it, the second namespace, by calling it out with this operator, the double colon scope operator. We say second colon colon x, and then you can see that the compiler also understands we are talking about the x that is in the second namespace, not the first. Now here, if we do a write line of y, since we're not calling out the second namespace, it's going to revert back to the first, because that comes from this using namespace up here. Now we can specifically say that we want to use the second y anytime there's a reference to y. So when we come down here and we look at x in this write line, it's going to use first because this namespace declaration is still up here. So that x is still hooked to that first, but y is going to come from second y. And that's because of this using right here. So you can see that we can use namespaces in a couple of different ways, and I didn't put the rename of a namespace in there just because it's so simple. And it's pretty straightforward to run. And we get first, second, first, second. Okay, first, second, first, second, which is first, second, first, second, just what we expected to happen. And that's the concept of namespaces, which lets you subdivide the world, subdivide your global scope into subscopes. Very, very useful. You'll see it used quite a bit, especially if you're maintaining older, large blocks of code and looking around inside the system code that Microsoft gives you, or any of the compilers. If you like a good a GNU or a Linux compiler or CPP, take a look around inside their system code. You'll see a lot of use of namespaces to kind of organize the world.